Welcome to Profit Led, a podcast by and for bootstrapped founders brave or crazy enough to grow a business to profitability with very few resources. Profit Led is brought to you by eWebinar, the leading automated webinar platform built to save you from doing the same webinar over and over again, from sales demos to customer onboarding to training. This season, Profit Led's host Melissa Kwan, who is also co-founder and CEO of eWebinar, will walk you step by step through the company's journey to $1 million. Melissa is a 3-time bootstrapper who has spent 13 years building startups. Together with co-host and eWebinar COO Todd Parmley, they will dive into one major topic per episode, sharing war stories, mistakes, and lessons learned as they grew the company to $1 million in annual recurring revenue 36 months after product launch. So buckle up, fellow bootstrappers. It's gonna be one heck of a ride.
Welcome to Profit Led Season 2, our Journey to $1 Million, Episode 25. I'm Melissa Kwan, co-founder and CEO of eWebinar and your host. And I'm here with my co-host, Todd Parmley, eWebinar's COO. Hey, Todd, how's it going?
Hey, Melissa. How are you?
Except for the technical difficulties we just had.
Yes, we've had really bad technical difficulties, really for the first time this morning, right?
Only to end with your contact flying out of your eye, but no.
Yeah, my contact spontaneously ejecting from my eye.
Well, in the last episode, we talked about the 5 pricing decisions that turned out to be costly mistakes and what we learned from each one. So things like not putting limits on our trials and grandfathering pricing when we should have raised them across the board.
Yes.
And today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics and the reason I became an avid bootstrapper, which is what lifestyle business means to us. And the reason I think this topic is an important one to talk about in this podcast is because it's really the driving force behind a lot of our business decisions. So especially on the way to $1 million, there are so many things you can do and so many things that people say you should be doing. But a lot of those things we decide against because it would get in the way of our lifestyle. And I also think the industry kind of gives the term lifestyle business a bad rep. So I guess talking about that and defining what that means and what that means for us specifically would help our audience or our listeners understand a lot of the decisions that we make in our business that may not be, I guess, wise in a financial sense.
Yeah, or conventional at the very least, right? I mean, I think that's a good place to start, is the fact that the reputation of lifestyle businesses is so bad. Like, it is seen as such a negative. It's like, oh, that's a lifestyle business. You know, that especially from like VC, they just, it's like a very kind of demeaning term that gets thrown around.
Yeah, I mean, I think in startups, lifestyle business often refers to non-VC backed companies. But only 1% of startups are ever venture funded. So if that's the case, then 99% of them are bootstrapped. So does that mean that bootstrapping equals lifestyle business?
Well, I think it's actually helpful to think of it that way, right? Because and I think we're going to talk a lot about this, is like, why did we pursue this? You know, why were we conscious in taking this approach? Because I think the reality is a bootstrapped business is a lifestyle business. You know, but if you're not aware of that, if you're not approaching it from that frame of mind, I think it's really easy for you to get overwhelmed by your business. But we may be getting ahead of ourselves. Let's start with, how would you define a lifestyle business?
I mean, for me, a lifestyle business is a business that gives everyone involved, not just the founders, a great lifestyle. Right. And that maybe that's a term that I personally made up because I think a lot of people think lifestyle business, they apply it to the founders. But I want people that are on our team to also be able to experience the fruits of their labor, like our labor as a team. Like, I would love people that work on this team to feel good being here in exchange, for their time. And I don't want people on my team to look at me having such a great life when they're the ones that are kind of restricted to this 9 to 5.
Well, first of all, I think that's a nice addition, which is because I think most people, when they hear lifestyle business, they think it means the founder only at the expense of their team. Like, it's sort of like there's like some little sweatshop of like engineers, like, like somewhere that's like getting paid nothing. But yeah, I think that I mean, I think another important thing is what's the end of a lifestyle business, right? What do I get by embracing this particular, like your definition? It could mean anything. It's what you want to make your lifestyle. So it could mean like if you want to go live on a farm and like have chickens on the side, it doesn't necessarily mean like, what you guys do, digital nomad. I'm much more of like, I want to live in one place and have like, honestly, a more conventional life. Right. But I love the freedom of being able to make my own schedule, being able to, take a vacation when I need to, take time off when I need to, decide when I want to work. Again, I think maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but for me, like a lifestyle business is one that allows me to focus more on my life as a whole than on work. Right. I was in the corporate world for a long time. And when I say the corporate world, it really wasn't the most intense of corporate worlds. I still had quite a bit of freedom looking in hindsight, but relative to this, it's just not, there's no comparison.
I mean, in the previous episodes where we talked about recruiting and how to recruit a top 1% CTO, like one of the biggest things that we talked about was like, because as a startup, you can't just pay top dollar. And a lot of times experienced CTOs, they don't need top dollar, right? They've worked for many years, they've got a nest egg, and they're looking for the best opportunity. And a lot of times the best opportunity is one that takes them closer to that dream lifestyle that they want to have, right? And if this CTO takes a chance on you, then they know that there is going to be, or there's a potential for a bigger outcome. But what matters right now, and the thing that's going to get them to quit their job, is the lifestyle that potentially the startup can give them right away.
I mean, I would add for myself that I can't also just clock in, right? Like if I were if it's not, I have to work someplace where there's an idea I believe in, so I actually get excited about what I'm working on. Doesn't mean that work's still not hard sometimes, but not only for me, because that to me is actually a part of the lifestyle of the lifestyle that I want is a job that I actually care about, right? That actually engages me, but that I'm not married to, that I can easily switch my gears mentally and be back in my life. You know what I mean? Like I used to carry my work around in my head a lot more than I do now. I'll still think about work when I'm not working, but it's different. It's just much more integrated. You know what I mean? Like there's not some massive distinction between working and, living.
Yeah. I mean, I want to tell a bit of my own experience about this word lifestyle business.
Yeah.
Right? When I moved to New York some years ago, I think like 7 years ago now, to build my last startup, I thought we had to raise capital in order to build a startup. Like I thought you had to. It wasn't even an option. I actually, like my newsletter that I pushed out today talks exactly about that, which I'll share in the show notes, as well as how I went from becoming a unicorn chaser to a bootstrap founder. It's from that experience. So I moved to New York and everyone wants to make an intro. I think I probably pitched about 20 VCs. I mean, at the time, I wanted to raise money because I needed to.
Right.
Like because I was just in so much debt from that company and I couldn't find product market fit, which in hindsight was the worst reason to raise capital. Right? You don't raise capital because you need it. Like you need it because you're in debt, right? So, but I didn't really know that. Like I didn't really know what I was doing because everyone was just like, oh, let me introduce you. And frankly, like that business was not venture scalable. Like it just wasn't a venture scalable product. It was very niche in a very niche industry. And every VC that I went to would just say, well, this is fine as a lifestyle business. It's okay if you want to run a lifestyle business. But they say it in this very demeaning way that was diminishing me, my capability, my idea, and my success. Like it made me feel like I wasn't ambitious enough. And in those environments, my knee-jerk reaction was to come up with an objection, right? Because like when you go for these pitches, like these pitch coaches or accelerators, like whatever it is, like they teach you how to pitch a VC and you have to pitch it as $1 billion outcome. So of course, like I'm trying to save this conversation, but at the same time, like I knew that it wasn't a venture scalable company, but I've just had so much experience with VCs just throwing that term around as if it's so bad. But as we said, 99% of startups are not venture funded. And it's actually, it's not good business, right? For VCs to encourage every business, if you know what I mean, right? Like their business is to invest in companies, right? So it's almost like in hindsight, like I knew they kind of had to say that, but like it just comes with this kind of like diminishing meaning. But the thing is, yeah, and I think like a lot, it makes it seem small. It makes you feel small. And as I was thinking about this episode, I actually typed in like, what is a lifestyle business into Google? And the first definition says, just gonna read this. Some examples of a lifestyle business include a small local bakery or coffee shop that is owned and operated by a single person or a small team. Like that is the first definition on Google. So what's the equivalent of that for a startup? Right? When someone says that to you, it's like, yeah, it's fine if you want to run this little startup. And you're like, no, my startup is not little. But the thing is, like between zero and unicorn, there are so many different incredible lifestyle businesses that give the founders and everyone involved a really great life. Like I personally know a founder that has 7 people on their team. They make $1.5 million of profit every year that he pays out between him and his co-founder every single month. Like that's a pretty sick business. I would love to make that kind of salary a year. Why would I do anything else? Ironically, the same guy is so bored of doing the same thing that he's now trying to start a new business. And I saw that, I'm like, why are you trying to start a new business? Like, isn't everything, like everything's rosy? He's like, yeah, but it's kind of boring. So I guess we all want what we can't have. The grass is greener on the other side. But the moral of that story is a lifestyle business can be an incredible business that pays you a lot of money. It doesn't have to be this small thing. And yes, like compared to an Uber, it's very small. But this guy that built this 7-person business has been doing this for 15 years and hasn't had 1/10 of the stress, I'm sure, as what Uber went through to get to where they are.
It's so funny how that, I think that's a really American thing too. I don't know. Maybe, you're not American, you're Canadian. So but it just feels like, it's just like that it's diminished a job or a company that gives you more kind of like less stress and anxiety and more flexibility in your life is somehow devalued, this like Puritan work ethic. I don't know.
But did you ever think about like what a lifestyle business is before coming into eWebinar? Like, did you ever have that definition, or did that kind of come together because of this?
I think I was heading in that direction in my own way, because I did leave that kind of corporate environment to go to a startup. And what's so funny is that like my very first gig in New York was at a startup that turned into a huge thing in New York in a very short period of time, quick by accident. It was Property Shark, right? And I got that job, like it was a total serendipitous event, right? But I took the job because it gave me freedom to go out, and I was directing theater at the time. I was like, I was doing all this other stuff, which I was really passionate about. So it gave me this like flexibility to go pursue this other thing, and have more of a flexible schedule. But the thing that's changed now is that now that I don't do that anymore, and that's not something I'm glad to be out of as well, even though I loved it when I did it, is I didn't really think about it like, what would I do if because I'm such a workaholic, I'm such a workaholic that if I don't have this sort of side passion to put into, then what do I want to spend my time with? That's not work. Because even that was work, right? So I don't think I really sort of started to think about the idea of like, what do I want to do with my life if I'm not working as much, right? How do I want to spend my time? And it's, I've started to expand that and figure that out. And they're not work related things, they're like, how do I want to spend time with friends? How do I want to, where do I want to travel? Right? Like all of those things I think came later. Cause even when it was my day job, right? That's what it was. My first startup was my quote unquote day job. And I had this side passion. So now I'm really thinking about like, how do I want to spend my time now that I have so much more freedom, which was kind of a foreign concept. I mean, my dad's a workaholic, all my siblings are workaholics, so it was a big shift for me.
I mean, I think it's normal for founders, especially newer founders, to think a business is all about revenue. I mean, a big part of it is revenue, so you can keep it going. But the first time I even thought to myself that there's more to business than revenue was when, we weren't doing super well in my last startup. I was talking to one of my mentors about like the different things that maybe I could do to the business to make it better. And I was just playing with these ideas, and he was like, every single one of those options are available to you, but one of those will help you get out of bed easier in the morning. And that comment made me realize that there is more to business than revenue. There's happiness, right? There's me. And from then on, I started making decisions with my heart instead of my head. And every decision just got easier because he was right. There were so many things that I could do for money, but a lot of them were kind of gnarly and I didn't want to do them. And one of them would make it easier for me to keep doing every single day. And consistency is a thing that beats motivation every single day.
I think maybe should we switch gears now and talk about how, in the context of eWebinar, like how we defined that as our quote unquote lifestyle business, what that actually meant. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I guess where it all started was when my last startup was acquired. So I'd run 2 startups before this for a combination of like 10 years. But I was never fully happy. I just kind of did what I needed to do to keep the company going. But I was always frustrated at how slow it was growing. Even when we were closing deals, I was like hating on our customers. Like I hated maintaining them. Like there were just so many things that were so frustrating about that business. And, after that company was acquired, I took a bit of time off, like a bit, meaning like a couple months. And I was playing with a bunch of different ideas. And I realized that, my next business, whatever it would be, has to be something that feeds into my happiness. Like otherwise, like what's the point? Because I had already had 10 years of this like low grade suffering. And so what I did was I made a list of 10 non-negotiables that I needed to be happy in my life. And those were going to serve as a guideline and kind of mini goals as to how I was going to build the next business. So those 10 things were, the first thing was the product has to be 100% web-based, no apps. And the reason is because my last business was web-based, but it also had to have an offline app on every single device, phone and tablet. And it was just, like every time we did an app update, it was so messy and we had to keep up with every single OS update. It was just crazy. And because we needed to have offline mode because it was an open house product and a lot of open houses don't have service, a lot of our users who were, older generation realtors, they didn't know how to use it. So that was really frustrating, but just the upkeep of a very basic technology was just so annoying. And of course, people were just not very forgiving because sometimes it just wouldn't work. So I think as soon as you add an app-based anything, It's just a whole different product that you have to manage. And the thing is, to the consumer, they don't care.
No.
Right? It should work on every device. And then bigger and bigger phones start coming out so that we would have a phone that would download an app, but the tablet version would load. But then the tablet version is too small for that
Oh my
phone.
God.
So
That's a
now you have
nightmare.
another issue. Or like the resolution of these new phones are so high that it thinks that a small phone is a tablet. So there's just all these issues that, that had to be dealt with. So 100% web-based, no apps. Number 2 is like, we had to have a fully remote team, no employees. Like I had a small team, but I always knew that I'm not a good people manager. Like that's why I've always been remote. And luckily my last co-founder, like he loves, going to the office, having a structure, having a team to talk to. Like for him, it's like a social activity. But for me, like I knew that I was just bad at it. And so and I didn't want to do any of like the team building stuff or like none of that HR stuff. So like next company, I'm like, everybody has to be a contractor. No employees. The third is I wanted to be able to share successes with friends. So in the beginning, we had a friends and family round specifically because I wanted to be able to share our successes with them. And number 4 is that we had to be in a proven market. So my first 2 companies, both of the products were in blue ocean. So we were like the first innovators, I guess, of our product in that industry in real estate. And it was so painful to be the only educator of your product in that space, constantly fighting for budget. So coming to eWebinar, one of my friends told me, your last company was so hard because you had to convince someone that they needed this. They're not already buying this. So then kind of a light bulb went off. I'm like, yeah, of course that's true. So coming into this, I'm like, we have to have something that already exists and we'll make it better. And then, we'll sell it to another audience, another industry, whatever it might be. The 5th one was that we had to build a business or a product that was a reflection of me, like myself. Like my first 2 companies were both in real estate, both apps that we sold to real estate agents and also real estate developers. And while that was a reflection of my experience, like making agents' lives marginally better was not going to be the purpose of my life. And then also getting yelled at.
Right. For trying to do that.
Yeah, for trying to do that. So it just didn't feel like it had any impact. And with eWebinar, like we are selling time and freedom. So like freeing people from that task of doing the same webinar over and over, like something that I did, is something that like, even if I wasn't having a great day, I could still get behind that mission. And it's like freedom has always been my number 1 priority. So like to even think about giving people back their freedom, like even before the product was like exciting for me. And the 6th one was like, I needed to create something that I could be excited about every day. And because I was living the pain of doing the same webinar over and over, and so just relieving myself from that with our own product was already exciting. So like I don't do any demos because eWebinar does our demo. And then being able to provide that experience to someone else was amazing, or is still amazing. Number 7, I guess we're still working on, but it has to be super easy for someone to understand, like including a child. So actually, while we were building eWebinar, I would speak to like our friends' kids about the idea and see if they understood it. And because for my last company, like it just wasn't that easy for people to understand. Like it was easy for people to understand like why that product existed, but it wasn't easy for people to see the value. They'd be like, yeah, I know what it does, but like, why can't they just use a piece of paper? The 8th one is that it has to have potential for a high financial ROI. And that means lowest input, highest output. And I know that sounds straightforward, but it's actually not. So for example, my last company was high input, low output. So multiple different apps, low average revenue per user, and to a limited audience that's very niche in North America, and they were usually above 50 or 60.
Right. A challenging
Like
customer.
so while it was generating revenue, like the input was so high for the output. Yeah, and also like there's a lot of companies that make a lot of money, but they have a lot of bodies. So I didn't want that. I wanted something that a small team could build, so a product that was predictable, manageable, web-based, that could charge a good amount, maybe with opportunity to upsell, but maybe the number of people that needs to work on it over time goes down, not goes up. So that was super important. And to be able to like, because in my last company the product was so limited, like we probably had like 10% of the market by the time we sold, but the rest of the market were like tiny brokerages that maybe I could never get to. So there was like such a limit to that. The ninth one is that it has to be sold 100% through the internet. So absolutely no in real life events, no calls, like nothing that ties me to a certain time. Because for the first 10 years, like because real estate technology was sold really through in person.
Yeah, right.
Like, yes, you can cold call, cold email, but until someone sees your face and shakes your hand, they're very unlikely going to buy from you.
That's correct.
And that's just the industry.
Yep.
So in the first quarter, I would just be on a plane going to these conferences just to meet people so that I could cold email them after. Or like warm email them.
That's so crazy.
And that was like so disruptive to my lifestyle. So a lot of these things I came up with because like it was either disrupting the way I lived in some way, or it was limiting my financial return so that it was limiting how I could live.
Hey, I'd like to take a second here to talk about my own company, eWebinar, and our mission to rescue people from what I call webinar hell, to give them back their time and save them literally hundreds of hours every month through webinar automation. If your sales team is tired of doing the same demo over and over for unqualified leads or worse, prospects who don't even show up, an on-demand demo powered by eWebinar can help them get their time back so they can close more deals. If you're doing customer onboarding and training on repeat, eWebinar can help you automate those so you never have to do them live again. Customer success teams are using eWebinar to run hundreds of sessions every single month without a live host. Why don't you give our product a try and see for yourself? Visit ewebinar.com to join our own on-demand demo or to sign up for a free trial. All right, now that I've gotten that on my system, let's get back to the episode.
And so the 10th one was really the most important in terms of a business idea, was it could not be limited by geography, language, industries, or line of business.
Right.
Because my last company was really just for real estate agents in North America, but it was really just for the US because Canada has a different model.
Right.
And so there's already a limited number of real estate agents like in the US, and then a very limited number that would actually like use technology. So that in itself was very limiting.
So then those principles became your kind of like guiding blueprint for how you made decisions.
Yeah. So having this list like this, I made this list before I even came up with an idea.
Oh, wow.
So this was just a way that I wanted to live my life. Like I saw that if I had this business, I could live my life in a certain way. I could call all my shots. I wouldn't have meetings. I wouldn't have live calls. I wouldn't have to do demos. I'd be making more money. I could expand into other markets, which I couldn't do before. Like we couldn't find product market fit for the longest time in my last company, but I couldn't try something else. And I couldn't sell it to another country. I tried that, but real estate is so regionalized that I couldn't apply the product to anything else, right? So having this list in front of me didn't just help me understand the business that I needed to live the lifestyle that I want, but it also helped me eliminate most of the ideas that I had on deck that I knew would infringe on my happiness in one way or another. So I had a whole bunch of like business ideas in front of me. I just hadn't picked one yet. And eWebinar was the one that stood out, but it was also in the end the one that I knew the most. Like I had other ideas that would make money, but I just knew webinar so well because I was doing so many onboardings, trainings, and demos on a daily basis. So it was just a problem that I knew intimately well, and it fit the bill. And these just became the guidelines where I used to make all my decisions. And because I had this guideline, it allowed me to say no to the things that I felt like compromised my freedom. Because I saw this, like, if I achieved this entire, like all these goals, then I would have ultimate freedom. And so along the way, I wouldn't do anything that my heart doesn't feel like doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to see that these guidelines are almost more about saying no than saying yes. Like, yes, you need to, like, you know what to say yes to, but I think it's more important to have a very clear idea with yourself about what you're not going to do, especially when it's tempting to do something that you think might be, a quick buck or whatever it is. It's never that. It's always more complicated than you think when you make. So it really makes sense to me that these were kind of like boundaries to not step outside.
Yeah. And these were the parameters that made a business enjoyable for me so I could perform my best and everyone on our team can enjoy the benefits of that as well. Because I also recognize how frustrated I was all the time in my last 2 businesses. And so, like, as much as you want to hide that, like, you can't really. Like, especially even for my co-founder. So I'm sure that impacted my performance, everyone else's performance. And I'm a firm believer that your team is only ever going to be as good as you are. So I'm miserable every single day. Like, it doesn't set a great example.
Yeah, it does. It makes an impact. There's no question. I mean, I was in my own version of this, not running the company, but overseeing a group within a company, and I could not have been more miserable. And you cannot hide it. You cannot, unless you're, I guess maybe some people can, but I definitely couldn't. So I guess now let's talk specifically about eWebinar, right? Like so those are our parameters. So what did this mean? What is this actually, how is this translated into real life? Like, what happened?
I mean, I think what happens is, like, I started this business to achieve a dream lifestyle business. Like, we always knew that we weren't going to raise capital. If we did raise capital, none of these things would apply, right? You just build a company for maximum revenue, right? And that's something that I wrote about in my newsletter as well. So the number one thing we do is we don't compromise on our boundaries, right? Like, those non-negotiables are our boundaries. Like, you can't negotiate on your non-negotiables, which I see a lot of people doing because, maybe they need the revenue. But as you said, like, nothing is ever as simple. It's not like, oh, let's just do it this one time. You don't just do it this one time, right? It's just like, yeah, 1 is a million. So, like, no in real life events. Like, I don't go to any conferences, even as an attendee. I don't do any, like, outside of like podcast recordings and maybe some webinars in the beginning, like the first year. I don't even do those. No calls, no exceptions, like no sales calls, no support calls. Like, I don't care how big of a company you are, because our product starts at $99. So you can't say, I'm a big company and you need to take my call, which happens at least once a week, but it doesn't benefit me. It benefits you, but it actually infringes on my lifestyle because I'm also quite nomadic. I travel a lot. So I don't know where I'm going to be. And every time I schedule a call, I actually regret it because then now I'm in a different time zone. But I think a lot of people feel like, oh, I can't close a customer if I don't talk to them. But we use products every day where there is nobody on the other side and we figure it out, right? Like Instagram, I'm on all the time. Like, something happens, I can't get on a call with someone. Like Gmail, like nobody is going to pick up a call on Gmail, but we use that. But why is it okay for them and not okay for me? Right. So another thing we do is we choose happiness over revenue. Right. And I'll say this again, we don't do things we don't want to do. So for example, when I was starting this podcast, a lot of my peers were like, oh, you shouldn't do that podcast. You should do a podcast on webinars. And then you could attract all these people that run webinars. I'm like, that sounds like the most boring thing on earth. Like, Why would I do that? If I'm going to create some content and I'm devoting my time to it. And by the way, we've been recording this for 1 year. Like, I am not going to record something that's so boring and talk to people that run webinars. Like, what is there to talk about? Like, I built the software. I don't need to be an expert in running them. There's enough experts in running them. But there's a lot of these examples, right? But like, I am personally also an advocate for lifestyle business to our team, right? So no holiday policy, everybody works remote. We don't micromanage. We trust our people. People can take their me days as long as they let the team know. And this is something that, we tell people in our interviews. And that helps me understand how excited somebody is about that. Or if they're like, oh, I actually need kind of more of a structure or a team environment. And one thing that I think David and I do really well is that we don't hide our lifestyle from our team. Like, we want to lead by example. And a lot of times we tell people not to work on evenings and weekends. Like, if we know they're working evenings and weekends, as long as the customer comes first. That's the only requirement. Like, if something breaks down on the weekend and you are the one who can fix it, or we need your help, then you need to jump on board. Like, we don't want to hear like, oh, it's my weekend, because you didn't work many, many weekends and evenings and holidays. So you can't have that benefit, but not also jump in when we actually need you. So when I say we lead by example, like, for example, if David and I are going to Burning Man and going to be offline for 8 days, like, we don't lie about that. Like, we don't say, oh, we're going to some retreat, and, because we don't want our team to know that we're at Burning Man partying or like doing some fun stuff. Like, we tell them because we want to encourage them that, hey, like, if this is something that you want to do, or maybe one day you want to start a business, like, this is the kind of freedom that you also can have. Right. So we really encourage like a work less culture and encouraged people to not work during the holidays. Like, I remember just a couple weeks ago, just regarding like the Christmas and New Year's holiday coming up, like, I knew that I knew it was going to be a quiet period. So I just let the team know, like, I'm pretty sure not a lot of people are doing webinars over those 2 weeks. I'm going to let you guys choose your own work hours as long as the customer comes first. Just make sure no one's angry. If something breaks, go and fix it. But do what you need to do, and then just come back recharged on the 6th.
Yeah. I mean,
that was that.
For myself, this is an interesting thing I learned about myself, is that it's like when you're in a 9-to-5 job, you have to stay, right? Even if you know your productivity is going to be crap for the next, like, I know myself now. I will work extra when I'm in a groove and I'm like, want to finish something. But like, there are times where I'm like, oh no, I am at diminishing returns right now. The absolute best thing for me to do is step away from this. And like, you can't do that but that's kind of what I meant earlier on when I said, there's just more of a blurred line between work and other life, right? Because they just sort of flow back and forth naturally now.
Yeah. And, everything that we're talking about right now, I also write in public, right? Either it's on my newsletter or on LinkedIn. And so some of that writing has actually attracted really good talent that come to us and say, hey, like, I'm looking for a new opportunity. This sounds like a great company. Like, do you want to look at my resume? We have hired people that way as well. Right. And another thing that translates is, into lifestyle, is we try to pay people more than their market rate where they're located. And that's really important for me, right? Because I think a lot of companies optimize for the lowest pay, but that sucks, right? Like, it doesn't breed loyalty. Somebody can pay, somebody on your team maybe 10% more and they're going to leave, right? But we actively, because we outsource and we hire people all over the world based on, like, one, what we can afford, but also their skill set. So like the highest skill set for what we can afford. But we actively try to pay them more. And in some countries, we can pay them 2 to 3 times more, even 5 times more. But another company is not going to do that.
Yeah, right. which is life transforming for many, many people.
For sure. And we have, somebody from the Philippines come to me and say, I'm actually starting to pursue some of my hobbies now, which I never thought I could do, which is really cool. Right. And, everyone's a contractor and everyone has to provide their own equipment. But if a laptop breaks in some countries that we hire from, that's like more than half their salary. So we'll buy the laptop, even though we don't have to, right? We don't charge them for it. We don't make them pay for it. Like for me, that's what living a good lifestyle means, is that your company takes care of you. So you don't have to live paycheck to paycheck and be in this survival mode, and then maybe be on the lookout for new opportunities. So for me, like I pay a little bit more, but it's a huge benefit to have security that no one's going anywhere.
Yeah. And it's like, even if someone doesn't take a different opportunity, just having them live in survival mode can either breed resentment or they're just not bringing their best, right? No one is bringing their best when they're in survival mode all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to pay everybody on our team, no matter where they're from, like double salary, because I think they would like 5 times their productivity. So I think that's the ultimate goal. I think that's why, like Netflix, for example, I mean, they're a corporate, but Netflix like is known to pay high salaries because they figured out this equation that if you pay a lot, then people are actually more productive and they stay. Right. So, I mean, I think your team is giving you their time, which is worth more than money. So you got to think about like, how are you going to retain them? And just being nice to them, yeah, it's good. Like it's one thing, but at the end of the day, like everyone has to live, and we want people to live well.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's probably a good place for us to wrap up today. Yeah. I mean, we talked about like what a lifestyle business is, how we defined it for ourselves, and then what we did to achieve that. What's your hot take for listeners today?
Yeah, I guess my hot take would be the only definition of success that matters is your own, right? Because if I cared about VC's idea of success or the media's idea of success, I would not be able to create this business. I would not be the person that I am. I wouldn't be happy, and neither would my team, right? Because I know that for me, ultimate freedom is ultimate happiness. So in this business, I don't have to do anything that I don't want to do, like not even in exchange for revenue. Like if you have to do something that you don't love in exchange for revenue, like for me, that's not freedom. So you have to be like, you have to have so much conviction, I guess, in your own definition of success. But ultimately, I think that's the only definition that matters. What's your hot take?
I mean, the thing that I haven't said, but like has been on my mind throughout this thing is purpose, like having a purpose. And that purpose is bigger than your work. Makes it much, much easier to kind of stay clear about what you want, what you don't want, and how you make decisions. So all of this to me is tied into purpose. Like what do I want my purpose for myself, but most importantly for others in my life to be? How can I make the world a better place? Like that has been important for me to define for myself, because then it gives me, focus in all of this, because it helps me say no to things I don't want to do, and it makes it much clearer to say yes to the things that I do want to do. So that's sort of my thought that's been underneath this entire conversation.
If you've been enjoying this podcast, I've got a small favor to ask. The only way Profit Led grows is by word of mouth. So if you'll do us a favor and hit the subscribe or follow button wherever you're listening or watching this podcast right now, it'd mean the world to us and help us continue to spend time making these episodes for you. Ping me on LinkedIn if there are particular topics you want us to get into this season. Send me any feedback you have on this podcast because I love hearing from you. My name is Melissa Kwan, last name spelled Kwan. To get notified of new episodes, join our mailing list by going to profitled.fm. I promise to only share things you'll actually care about. Thanks for listening. Bye now.